August 27th, 2021. A witness at Spread Creek Dispersed Camping Area in Wyoming sees something that doesn't sit right. A white van, parked in the same spot for days. No movement, no signs of life. They don't think much of it at the time. By the time anyone realizes what that van meant, Gabby Petito had already been dead for weeks. Strangled, left alone in the wilderness while her killer drove her van back to Florida, went hiking with his parents, and refused to say a single word about where she was. The photos on Instagram told one story. The body cam footage told another. And the truth? The truth was buried in the dirt near the Teton Range while the world watched and waited for answers. This is the case that made America pay attention to domestic violence. The case where we all saw the warning signs and couldn't do anything to stop what came next. Welcome to Deadly Intent, the podcast that goes beyond the crime scene to explore the psychology behind murder. I'm your host, Carrion. Every crime leaves evidence. Blood spatter, DNA, fingerprints. But the most telling evidence isn't what's left at the scene. It's what's revealed in the choices a killer makes before, during, and after. Intent doesn't lie. People do. This is Deadly Intent. Gabby Petito should be alive today. That's not hindsight. That's not wishful thinking. That's a fact. Because on August 12th, 2021, 2 weeks before she was murdered, police in Moab, Utah pulled over Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie after multiple witnesses reported a domestic dispute. They had cameras running. They interviewed both of them separately. They documented scratches on Brian's face and arms. They heard Gabby crying, apologizing, blaming herself for everything. And they let them go. Not because they didn't care. Not because they were lazy cops who didn't take domestic violence seriously. They let them go because Gabby did exactly what so many victims do. She protected her abuser. She took the blame. She convinced everyone, including herself, that she was the problem. 2 weeks later, she was dead. This case isn't just about what Brian Laundrie did to Gabby Petito. It's about what we all watched happen in real time and couldn't stop. It's about the Instagram feed that showed a dream life while Gabby was living a nightmare. It's about a system that tries to help but still fails too many people. And it's about the questions her family will never get answered because Brian Laundrie took the coward's way out. He killed himself before he could be arrested, leaving behind a notebook where he tried to rewrite the story one last time. But we're not letting him control the narrative anymore. Today, we're telling Gabby's story. Gabby Petito was 22 years old when she died. 22. That's barely out of college age. That's still figuring out who you are and what you want from life. She was blue-eyed, blonde, the kind of girl who lit up every room she walked into. Her friends described her as bubbly, creative, full of energy. She had this infectious enthusiasm for life that made people want to be around her. She worked at a juice bar in Northport, Florida. Taco Bell before that. Just regular jobs while she figured out what she really wanted to do. And what she really wanted to do was be a travel blogger. She wanted to document adventures, inspire people, build something meaningful out of her experiences. In a lot of ways, she was like thousands of other young people trying to build a life on social media, trying to turn wanderlust and creativity into something real, something that mattered. So in July 2021, she and her fiancé Brian Laundrie set out on a cross-country road trip in a converted Ford Transit van. They'd spent months fixing it up, turning it into a tiny home on wheels. White exterior, wooden interior, fairy lights strung across the ceiling. It was small but cozy, perfect for two people in love. The plan was to visit national parks across the country, camp under the stars, hike through places most people only see in postcards, and share the whole journey on YouTube and Instagram. They were going to document everything: the sunsets, the hikes, the coffee stops at small-town diners, all of it. They called it their van life adventure. And for the first few weeks, it looked perfect. Gabby posted photos from the trip, her and Brian at the Great Sand Dunes in Colorado, barefoot in the desert, arms spread wide, smiling at the camera. Another one at Zion National Park, standing in front of red rock formations that looked like they belonged on Mars. Pictures of the van parked in scenic overlooks with mountains in the background. Captions about gratitude and wanderlust and living in the moment, about how blessed she felt to be doing this, and how this was the adventure of a lifetime. It looked like a fairy tale, like the kind of life everyone dreams about when they're scrolling through Instagram at midnight, stuck in their regular life, wishing they were somewhere else. But if you know anything about social media, and I think most of us do by now, you know the truth. What you see online is the highlight reel. It's the version of life people want you to believe. The filtered, curated, carefully edited version that leaves out all the ugly parts. And Gabby Petito's Instagram feed was hiding something much darker than filtered sunsets and adventure hashtags. Because behind the scenes, Brian Laundrie was controlling, jealous, and volatile. Friends later said he didn't like Gabby talking to other people, especially other men. Got upset when she spent time working on her blog instead of focusing on him. Didn't want her building a following or getting attention from strangers online. One friend described an incident where Brian took Gabby's ID so she couldn't go out without him. Another said he would read her text messages and question her about who she was talking to. Those are red flags, big ones. The kind that people on the outside can see clearly but victims often can't or won't acknowledge. There were fights, tension, the kind of slow-building pressure that people on the outside don't always see until it's too late. The kind that victims minimize because they don't want to admit what's really happening, because admitting it means facing a choice they're not ready to make. And on August 12, 2021, that pressure reached a breaking point. Moab, Utah, a small desert town near Arches National Park, population around 5,000. The kind of place where tourists pass through on their way to somewhere else, stop for gas and snacks, maybe grab lunch at a local diner. On August 12th, multiple witnesses called 911 to report a couple fighting near a grocery store. One witness described seeing Brian slapping Gabby. Another saw him grabbing her face, pushing her. A third saw him trying to take her phone away and lock her out of the van. Police caught up with them on the highway just outside town. Officer Eric Pratt pulled them over around 4:30 in the afternoon. He had his body camera running. Everything that happened next was recorded. And that footage, those 77 minutes of body cam video, is hard to watch. Not because it's graphic. There's no blood, no violence captured on film. It's hard to watch because you're watching a woman in crisis who can't or won't ask for help. You're watching someone actively protect the person who's hurting her. Gabby is sobbing when Officer Pratt approaches the van, hyperventilating. She's got dirt on her face and tears streaming down her cheeks, and she's trying to explain what happened, but she can barely get the words out. The officer asks if she's okay, and Gabby says yes, even though she's clearly not. She tells the officers that it's all her fault, that she hit Brian first, that she has OCD and anxiety, and she gets worked up over little things and she shouldn't have pushed him while he was driving. She says she grabbed the steering wheel because she thought he was going to leave her in Moab, that she was afraid of being abandoned. She's apologizing, over and over and over, taking full responsibility for everything. She tells them about her mental health struggles, about how she gets anxious, about how she knows she can be difficult sometimes, about how Brian was just trying to calm her down and she made it worse. Meanwhile, Brian is calm, collected. When the officers approach him separately, he's got his hands in his pockets, smiling, laughing even. He's got visible scratches on his face and arms. Defensive wounds. Anyone with domestic violence training would tell you. But he's playing it off like it's no big deal. When they ask him what happened, he says Gabby just gets emotional sometimes. That she grabbed the steering wheel and he had to push her away. That she hit him and he was trying to protect himself. That she's got some mental health issues and sometimes she just loses it over small stuff. He says it so casually, like it happens all the time. Like it's normal. Like Gabby's just a high-strung girlfriend who can't handle stress. He tells the officers he didn't want to press charges. Says he loves her. Says he just wants to make sure she's okay. He plays it cool. Plays the concerned boyfriend. Plays the victim. And it works. The officers separate them and talk to each of them individually. They take detailed statements. They document the scratches on Brian's face. They note Gabby's emotional state. They try to figure out what happened and who was at fault. And they make a decision. They're going to separate the couple for the night to let things cool off. Under Utah law, They should have made an arrest. When there's evidence of domestic assault, which the scratches on Brian's face clearly were, someone is supposed to be taken into custody. But the officers classified this as a mental health crisis instead of domestic violence. They arranged for Gabby to stay in the van. Brian got a hotel room at the Bowen Hotel, paid for by the Moab Police Department. They were told to take some space, calm down, and think about whether they wanted to continue the trip together. No charges were filed, no arrests were made, because on paper it looked like a mutual fight between two stressed-out travelers who needed a break. A young couple dealing with the pressure of being on the road together 24/7 in a tiny converted van. A boyfriend with scratches on his face from a girlfriend who admitted to hitting him first. But here's what actually happened. Gabby Petito was being abused, and she didn't know how to ask for help. Or maybe she did know, and she was too scared, too conditioned to think it was her fault, too worried about what would happen if she told the truth. So she protected Brian, took all the blame, and made herself out to be the unstable one. And 2 weeks later, he killed her. Let's pause here, because this is part of the story that people struggle with the most. How could Gabby not see what was happening to her? Why did she take the blame? Why didn't she just leave? Why didn't she tell the officers the truth when they asked? And the answer is, abuse doesn't start with violence. It starts with control. Brian Laundrie didn't wake up one day and decide to kill Gabby Petito. He spent months, maybe years, slowly eroding her sense of self, making her believe that everything wrong in their relationship was her fault, that she was too anxious, too emotional, too needy, too much. That's how abusers operate. They don't hit you on the first date. They charm you. They love bomb you. They make you feel like you found your soulmate. And then, slowly, they start cutting you off from other people. They isolate you from friends and family. They make you dependent on them, emotionally, financially, logistically. They convince you that no one else understands you like they do, that no one else will put up with you. And then when the relationship starts to crack, when you start pushing back or questioning things or wanting your own space, they make sure you believe you're the one breaking it. By the time the Moab police pulled them over, Gabby was already conditioned to defend Brian, to take the blame, to believe she was the problem. And the officers? They did their best with the training they had. They separated the couple. They documented everything. They tried to de-escalate the situation. But they were looking at it through the lens of a mutual fight, not intimate partner violence. They saw scratches on Brian's face and assumed Gabby was the aggressor. They didn't see the bigger pattern, didn't recognize that the person crying and apologizing and blaming themselves is often the victim, not the abuser. Because abusers are good at staying calm, good at playing the role, good at making themselves look like the reasonable one while their victim falls apart. And Brian Laundrie played it perfectly. So they let them go, told them to take the night apart and think things through. And Gabby Petito drove away in that van with the man who would kill her 2 weeks later. After the Moab stop, Gabby and Brian continued their trip. They drove to Ogden, Utah, then Salt Lake City. Then they headed toward Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. But something had changed. The Instagram posts slowed down, then stopped altogether. The last photo Gabby posted was on August 25th, a picture of her standing in front of a colorful butterfly mural in Ogden, Utah. The caption, "Happy Halloween." It was August, not Halloween. Not even close. Halloween was 2 months away. To her followers, it was just a quirky caption. Maybe she was planning ahead for fall content. Maybe she loved Halloween so much she couldn't wait. Maybe it was an inside joke. But to Gabby's mom, Nicole Schmidt, it was a red flag. That same day, August 25th, Nicole received a text from Gabby's phone. It said, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Except Gabby never called her grandfather Stan. She called him Grandpa. Always. Since she was a little kid. It wasn't a nickname she used. It wasn't something she'd ever say. Nicole knew something was wrong. She tried calling Gabby's phone. No answer. She tried texting. No response. Over the next few days, she tried again and again to reach her daughter. Left voicemails. Sent texts asking if she was okay. Asked her to just send a quick message back so they'd know she was safe. Nothing. And then, On August 27th, she got one more text from Gabby's phone. It said, "No service in Yosemite." But Gabby wasn't in Yosemite. She was supposed to be in Wyoming, hundreds of miles away from Yosemite National Park in California. The itinerary she'd shared with her family had them headed to Yellowstone next, not backtracking to Yosemite. Nicole Schmidt knew. Right then, she knew her daughter was in trouble, maybe already dead, because Gabby wouldn't have sent that text. Gabby wouldn't have called her grandfather Stan. Someone else was using Gabby's phone, and that someone was almost certainly Brian Laundrie. On August 30th, Nicole filed a missing persons report with the Suffolk County Police Department in New York, where Gabby's family lived. Meanwhile, Brian Laundrie had already made it back to Florida. He showed up at his parents' house in Northport on September 1st, alone, driving Gabby's van. No Gabby, no explanation, just silence. Imagine this for a second. Really put yourself in this position. Your daughter is on a cross-country trip with her fiancé. You haven't heard from her in days. Not really, anyway. The texts you're getting don't sound like her. You file a missing persons report because you know something's wrong. And then you find out that her fiancé came home, alone, driving her van. And he won't tell you where she is, won't answer your calls, won't respond to your messages, won't even acknowledge that you're asking. That's the nightmare Gabby's family was living. They started calling the Laundries. Gabby's mom, Nicole, her stepdad, Jim Schmidt, her biological father, Joe Petito, her stepmother, Tara Petito, all of them begging for information. Where is Gabby? When did you last see her? What happened in Wyoming? Is she hurt? Is she safe? Just tell us where she is. The Laundries refused to answer. On the advice of their lawyer, a guy named Steve Bertolino, they said nothing. Issued a statement through their attorney on September 3rd that they were remaining in the background while the search played out. Remaining in the background, like this was a spectator sport, like they didn't know exactly what had happened to Gabby. Brian said nothing. He stayed in his parents' house in Northport, didn't speak to police, didn't speak to the media, didn't reach out to Gabby's family even once. And then, on September 11th, the Laundries released another statement through their lawyer. They said they hoped Gabby would be found safe and expressed their sincerest condolences to her family. Condolences, like she was already dead, like they knew she wasn't coming home. Meanwhile, the Laundries were going about their lives like nothing had happened. Neighbors reported seeing them outside mowing the lawn, going for bike rides, doing yard work, acting completely normal, while Gabby's family was falling apart 1,000 miles away. One neighbor said they saw Brian and his parents loading up a camper and leaving for a camping trip at Fort DeSoto Park on September 6th, while Gabby was still missing and her family was desperately searching for her. They went camping like it was a regular weekend. And that silence, that absolute refusal to help, to even pretend to care, told Gabby's parents everything they needed to know. Something terrible had happened to their daughter, and Brian Laundrie knew exactly what it was. By September 11th, Gabby Petito's story had gone viral. It started on TikTok, true crime communities picking up on the case, breaking down the timeline, analyzing the body cam footage from Moab. Then it spread to Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit. Cable news picked it up, local news, national news. Within days, Gabby's face was everywhere. Her Instagram page became a memorial. People left comments begging for her to be found safe. Others started analyzing her posts, looking for hidden clues, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. One TikTok user went through all of Gabby's photos and noticed that she was wearing the same clothes in multiple posts from different locations, suggesting Brian might have been posting old photos for her after she was already dead. Others pointed out that the "no service in Yosemite" text didn't make sense. Why would Gabby say she had no service in a place where she wasn't even supposed to be? And how could she send a text saying she had no service? People started creating timeline, mapping out everywhere the van had been spotted, cross-referencing locations with dates and social media posts. And then, on September 18th, a woman named Miranda Baker came forward with a story that made everyone's blood run cold. She had been driving through Wyoming on August 29th when she and her boyfriend picked up a hitchhiker near Coulter Bay Village in Grand Teton National Park. The hitchhiker was Brian Laundrie. He told them he had been camping alone for days at a place called Snake River, that his fiancée was back at their van at Spread Creek working on their social media page. He seemed agitated, nervous, kept looking around. Miranda and her boyfriend were headed toward Jackson Dam, which was in the same general direction as Spread Creek. When Miranda mentioned Jackson, Brian suddenly freaked out. He offered them money, $200, to pull over and let him out immediately, right there on the side of the road, miles from anything. They pulled over, confused, and Brian jumped out, thanked them hurriedly, and disappeared into the woods. The date was August 29th, 2 days after Gabby was last seen alive, 2 days after that white van was spotted at Spread Creek. Brian was putting distance between himself and the crime scene, making it look like he had been camping somewhere else, creating an alibi that wouldn't hold up under any real scrutiny but might buy him some time. On September 19, 2021, a travel blogger and YouTuber named Jen Bethune was going through footage from her own cross-country road trips. She had been driving through Wyoming in late August, filming her travels on dash cam. She had been near Spread Creek dispersed camping area on August 27th, the same day witnesses reported seeing Gabby's white van in that area. Her dash cam had been running the whole time, and when she reviewed the footage, going back through hours of Wyoming scenery, she saw it. A white Ford Transit van parked alone in the distance, tucked back from the road, barely visible behind some bush. You had to be looking for it to even notice it was there. It was Gabby's van. Jen turned the footage over to the FBI immediately, gave them the exact GPS coordinates based on where her dash cam recorded the footage. Investigators swarmed the area on September 19th. Within hours, they found her. Gabby Petito's body was discovered in a remote campsite near the Teton Range, not far from where her van had been parked. She had been dead for weeks, left in the wilderness, alone, exposed to the elements. The cause of death, blunt force injuries to the head and neck, with manual strangulation. Manual strangulation means someone wrapped their hands around Gabby's throat and squeezed until she stopped breathing. The blunt force trauma to her head and neck means she was hit, struck hard enough to leave injuries on her skull. It's not quick. It's not painless. It's not an accident. It takes time. Sustained, deliberate pressure. You have to maintain that pressure for minutes, not seconds, to kill someone that way. Which means Brian Laundrie watched Gabby struggle, watched her gasp for air, watched her fight and claw and try to get away, watched the life drain out of her. And then he left her there, took her van, took her credit cards, drove back to Florida, spent her money on gas and food along the way, and acted like nothing had happened. On September 17, 2021, 2 days before Gabby's body was found, Brian Laundrie's parents reported him missing. They said he had told them on September 14th that he was going hiking in the Carlton Reserve and would be back later. They hadn't seen him since. The Carlton Reserve is a 25,000-acre wilderness area in Sarasota County, Florida. Swamps, dense vegetation, alligators, venomous snakes. The kind of place where you can disappear if you know where you're going. The kind of place where bodies don't get found for years, if ever. And Brian Laundrie knew exactly where he was going. The FBI launched a massive search operation, helicopters with thermal imaging, drones scanning the canopy, dive teams searching murky water, bloodhounds tracking scent trails, hundreds of law enforcement officers from multiple agencies combing through miles and miles of swampland, looking for a man who didn't want to be found. But Brian had a head start, and he had clearly been planning this for a while. His parents later admitted that they hadn't actually seen him since September 13th, a full day earlier than they originally reported, which meant he'd had even more time to get deep into the reserve and hide. The search went on for weeks. Every single day, the media camped outside the Laundrie house in Northport. News vans lined the streets. Protesters showed up with signs demanding answers, calling Brian a murderer, telling his parents they should be ashamed. Dog the Bounty Hunter, yeah, that Dog the Bounty Hunter, joined the search, claiming he had tips about Brian's whereabouts. Reality TV mixing with real-life tragedy in the most bizarre way. But there was nothing, no trace of him, no credible sightings despite hundreds of supposed tips flooding in from across the country. People were seeing Brian Laundrie everywhere. Gas stations in Alabama, hiking trails in North Carolina, rest stops in Tennessee. but none of it panned out. It was like he had vanished into thin air. And then, on October 20th, 2021, more than a month after Gabby's body was discovered, Brian's remains were found in the Carlton Reserve. His parents had gone to the reserve to help with the search. The area had been underwater for weeks due to flooding, but the water had finally receded enough to search it properly. Chris Laundrie found a white bag sticking out of the mud. Inside were Brian's belongings, a dry bag containing his notebook, a backpack, and a gun. Nearby, partially submerged in shallow water and scattered by wildlife, were human remains. Dental records confirmed it was Brian. He'd been dead for weeks. Cause of death? Self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He had killed himself shortly after entering the reserve, probably within days of Gabby's body being found, before he could be arrested, before he could face her family in court. He left behind a notebook, and in that notebook he wrote a confession. Brian Laundrie's notebook confession is 8 pages long, written in pen, in his own handwriting, describing what happened to Gabby Petito. He admitted to killing her, but even in death, even when there was nothing left to gain from lying, he tried to rewrite the story one last time. He claimed it was a mercy killing. According to Brian's version, the version he wanted the world to believe, Gabby had been injured somehow. He doesn't explain how or what happened, just that she was hurt and in pain, and he killed her to end her suffering. He wrote that he couldn't bear to see her in pain, that watching her suffer was unbearable, that he did it out of love, that it was the hardest thing he'd ever had to do. He tried to paint himself as a tragic figure, a man forced to make an impossible choice, a boyfriend who loved his girlfriend so much he couldn't let her suffer. It was a lie, a complete, calculated, self-serving lie. The autopsy showed no injuries consistent with an accident, no broken bones, no head trauma, no wounds that would leave someone unable to walk or to get help, no medical emergency that would explain why Gabby needed to be put out of her misery. What the autopsy did show? Blunt force injuries to the head and neck with manual strangulation, evidence of a violent struggle, the kind of injuries you get when someone attacks you, when someone wraps their hands around your throat and squeezes until you stop breathing, when someone hits you hard enough to leave marks on your skull. That's not mercy, that's murder. And Brian Laundrie knew it. That's why he ran. That's why he killed himself before he could face justice, because he didn't want to sit in a courtroom and hear the forensic pathologist explain what he'd done, didn't want to watch Gabby's parents cry while prosecutors showed photos of their daughter's body, didn't want the world to see him for what he really was. So he took the easy way out, left Gabby's family with no answers, no closure, no chance to look him in the eye and ask why, no trial where they could hear the evidence and see justice served, just a notebook full of lies and a coward's grave in a Florida swamp. Let's talk about what Brian Laundrie's suicide really means, because I think we need to be clear about this. Some people want to frame it as guilt, remorse, a man who couldn't live with what he had done, a person so consumed by grief over losing Gabby that he couldn't go on. But here's the reality. Brian Laundrie didn't kill himself because he felt guilty. He killed himself because he didn't want to face the consequences of his actions. He didn't want to sit in a jail cell awaiting trial. Didn't want to wear an orange jumpsuit in front of cameras. Didn't want his face plastered on every news outlet as the man who murdered Gabby Petito. He didn't want to sit in a courtroom and hear Gabby's mother testify about the last time she spoke to her daughter. Didn't want to listen to the forensic pathologist explain in clinical detail how long it takes to strangle someone to death. Didn't want prosecutors to show the jury photos of Gabby's body left decomposing in the Wyoming wilderness. He didn't want the world to see him for what he really was, so he took the easy way out, put a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger, left Gabby's family with no answers, no closure, no trial, no conviction, no chance to allocate at sentencing and tell him exactly what he took from them. And that notebook confession? That was his final attempt to control the narrative, to paint himself as a tragic figure who made a terrible mistake, to rewrite the story so he didn't look like the monster he was, to make people feel sorry for him. But it didn't work, because the evidence doesn't lie, the autopsy doesn't lie, and Gabby's body, left alone in the wilderness for 3 weeks, tells the truth that Brian's notebook tried to erase. He strangled her. He killed her. and then he ran. That's not remorse. That's not love. That's not mercy. That's cowardice. Gabby Petito's death became more than just a murder case. It became a national conversation, not just about what happened to her, but about how we talk about missing people, how we respond to domestic violence, how we fail victims long before they become headlines, how the system that's supposed to protect people keeps letting them slip through the cracks. And we have to talk about the uncomfortable truth at the center of all this attention. Gabby Petito's case went viral in part because she was young, white, blonde, and photogenic. Her story fit a narrative that gets attention. The pretty girl on a dream adventure, the Instagram perfect life hiding a dark secret, the body cam footage everyone could watch and analyze, the fiancé who came home alone and refused to talk. It was made for social media, made for true crime podcasts, made for cable news. But while millions of people were searching for Gabby Petito, thousands of other people, Indigenous women, Black women, women of color, were also missing. And their stories weren't making the headlines. Their families weren't getting the same resources. The FBI wasn't launching massive searches. Their cases weren't trending on TikTok. It's called Missing White Woman Syndrome, and it's real. And to their credit, Gabby's family has openly acknowledged it. They've said from the beginning that they know Gabby's case got attention other families don't get. They know that's not fair. They know that every missing person deserves the same resources, the same media coverage, the same urgency. So they've used the platform Gabby's case created to advocate for all missing people. They started the Gabby Petito Foundation to help families searching for their loved ones and to support victims of domestic violence. They've partnered with organizations working on behalf of missing Indigenous women. They've spoken out about the disparities in how cases are handled based on race and socioeconomic status. Because Gabby's death wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a systematic failure. A failure of a system that saw the warning signs on August 12th and didn't intervene. A failure of training that didn't equip officers to recognize the difference between a mutual fight and intimate partner violence. A failure of a culture that still teaches women to be quiet, to not make scenes, to protect the people who hurt them. And the Moab Police Department? They launched an internal investigation after Gabby's death, brought in an outside investigator to review what happened during that August 12th traffic stop. The report, released in January 2022, found that the officers who responded made several critical mistakes. They didn't properly classify the incident as a domestic violence situation. They didn't follow Utah state law, which requires an arrest when there's probable cause that domestic assault occurred. They focused on Gabby's emotional state instead of the power dynamics at play in the relationship. They saw a crying woman and a calm man with scratches on his face, and they made assumptions based on that. They saw Gabby as the aggressor because she admitted to hitting him, but they didn't see that reactive violence from a victim is different from the violence of an abuser. They didn't recognize that the person who's calm and collected during a domestic dispute is often the person with power in the relationship. If they had handled it differently, Gabby might still be alive. But they didn't, and she's not. And now her family has to live with that every single day. So what do we take away from this case? First, believe victims, even when they're crying and apologizing and taking all the blame. Especially then, because that's what abuse does. It rewires your brain to believe you're the problem. It makes you defend the person hurting you because you've been conditioned to think they're the only one who will put up with you. Second, look for the pattern, not just the moment. The Moab officers saw scratches on Brian's face and assumed Gabby was the aggressor. But if they'd asked more questions, if they had dug deeper into the relationship dynamics, into the history, into who had power and who didn't, they might have seen the control, the jealousy, the isolation. Those are the warning signs that matter. Those are the things that tell you someone's in danger. Third, social media lies. Gabby's Instagram made her life look perfect, like a dream come true. But behind every filtered photo was a relationship falling apart. Behind every caption about gratitude and adventure was a woman being slowly crushed by someone who claimed to love her. Don't assume you know what someone's life is really like based on what they post online. Don't assume that because someone's smiling in photos, they're happy in real life. And finally, Domestic violence doesn't always look the way you think it does. It's not always bruises and black eyes and broken bones. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's emotional control. Sometimes it's financial dependence. Sometimes it's isolation from friends and family. Sometimes it's making you believe that you're too broken for anyone else to love. And by the time it turns physical, by the time there are visible marks and witnesses calling 911, the victim is already so deep in the cycle that leaving feels impossible. Gabby Petito tried to leave. After the Moab incident, she was planning to fly home to New York. She told a friend she was thinking about ending the trip, about getting some space from Brian. But Brian convinced her to stay, convinced her to keep going, convinced her that everything would be okay if they just kept trying. And 2 weeks later, she was dead. That's the reality of abuse. It doesn't let you go. It makes leaving feel scarier than staying. And sometimes, too many times, it kills you. On February 14, 2024, what would have been Gabby Petito's 25th birthday, her family released a statement. They said they were channeling their grief into action, into advocacy, into making sure Gabby's death meant something, into preventing other families from having to go through what they've gone through. And maybe that's the only way to make sense of a senseless tragedy. You can't bring Gabby back. You can't undo what Brian Laundrie did. You can't rewind to August 12th and make the Moab officers see what was really happening. You can't give Gabby's parents their daughter back. But you can make sure her story saves someone else. You can teach officers to recognize the signs of intimate partner violence. You can educate people about what abuse really looks like when it's happening. You can create resources for victims who feel trapped and don't know where to turn. You can amplify the voices of the missing who don't get headlines. You can make sure that when someone sees the warning signs, they know what they're looking at, and they know how to help. Gabby Petito should be alive today. She should be 25 years old. She should be traveling the world, posting photos, building the life she dreamed about. But she's not. Because Brian Laundrie strangled her and left her in the dirt. Because he was a coward who couldn't handle the idea that Gabby might leave him. Because he saw her as something he owned rather than someone he loved. Because when he felt himself losing control of her, he made sure she couldn't leave. So he killed her. And then he ran. And then he put a gun in his mouth so he'd never have to face what he'd done. That's not tragic. That's not love. That's not a mercy killing. That's murder. Plain and simple. Gabby Petito deserved better. She deserved to live. She deserved to chase her dreams and build her life and grow old. And her family deserves justice that they'll never fully get, because Brian Laundrie took that from them too. All we can do now is remember her. Not as the girl in the Instagram photos with the perfect smile. Not as the victim in the headlines. Not as the case that went viral. But as Gabby, as a 22-year-old woman who had dreams and plans and a whole life ahead of her. A woman who loved adventure and wanted to inspire people, and worked at a juice bar while she figured out what she wanted to be. A woman who trusted the wrong person and paid for it with her life. Intent doesn't lie. People do. I'm Carman Carrion, and this has been Deadly Intent. He called himself BTK, Bind, Torture, Kill. For 31 years, Dennis Rader terrorized Wichita, Kansas, not as some shadowy figure lurking in the darkness, but as a church council president, a Boy Scout leader, a compliance officer who measured people's grass and cited them for violations. He sent letters to the police, taunting them, describing his murders in graphic detail. He wanted credit. He wanted attention. He craved the recognition that his ordinary life would never give him. And when he finally got caught, it wasn't some brilliant detective work that brought him down. It was a floppy disk and his own arrogance. Next time on Deadly Intent, the BTK killer, the man who hid in plain sight while 10 victims paid the price for his need to be someone. Intent doesn't lie. People do.